Thanks for being here on this beautiful day. Almost like you don't believe me. And happy birthday, Manuel. As Manuel said, and as Anitra emphasized, the private market has completely failed ordinary working people. But that is not just the poorest of the poor who are obviously bearing the brunt of unaffordability and livability. But our city has reached such a crisis point that households that used to consider themselves comfortably middle class are now in extreme crisis and are probably one tiny financial crisis or one rent increase away from being displaced from this city. And it's not just us as housing activists and as social justice activists, as socialists, who are saying this. Last week, The Stranger had an article where it reported on a study by economists of the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. They do this study every year, and this year they're saying that the crisis is extremely palpable in Seattle. And they go by the affordability rule of thumb. Economists have this affordability rule of thumb, meaning if you're paying anything more than 30% of your income on housing, and you guys should do that calculation, I'm sure a lot of us come in that category. If you pay anything more than 30% of your income on housing, then you are in critical need of affordable housing. And that is not socialists saying it, that is mainstream economists saying it. And so let's emphasize that at the doorstep. When you talk to people and they ask you, what does it mean? What is affordability? This is what affordability is. There is no mystique behind it. It's very clear. And the study goes on to say that absent public subsidy, the private market rarely produces new rental housing affordable to ordinary income households. So we have a lot of agreement on this. The Stranger in that article concluded by saying, without significantly more investment in housing for low-income people, there is no sign that trends will look any better come this time next year. So we're not inventing some new logic here. That's not the question. The question is, how are we going to win public investment in affordable housing? How are we going to win, as a first step, 25% housing affordability in the private market to go on to win rent control? How are we this year going to demand that landlords pay for economic evictions? That's the question. And we know from all our own experience since 2013, but throughout history, there is no way that such social change in favor of the ordinary working people, people who go to work every single day and make this city run, this change for us has never come without us fighting for it. We can't wait around for landlord lobby, the billionaires, the politicians who support the billionaires to suddenly have a change in heart. Emily mentioned we've already won some victories. Last year, we won a law that says that if you are the first fully qualified renting applicant, then the landlord has a legal obligation to grant you tenancy. We passed another law that gave a 6-month payment plan for move-in fees. But now, what do you think the landlord lobby is doing this year? They have a lawsuit on the first-in-time law. They have a lawsuit against the move-in fee law. So we have only one way forward, which is to build a truly grassroots independent movement to win housing justice in this city. A movement. And what does it mean to build an independent movement? What does it mean to build an independent mass movement? It means the movement has to be independent of the billionaire class, of the landlord lobby, of developers, of Wall Street speculators, of Vulcan and Paul Allen, but it also has to be independent of the politicians that masquerade as defenders of working class people, but in reality strongly fight for the greed of the landlord lobby and the big developers. That's what it means to build an independent mass movement. But it also means that we're not going to win with the number of people that we have here. That is why it is so important to knock on the doors of people like ourselves who know the problem, who live the problem, and don't need to be convinced that there is a problem, but need to find a way to fight. That is what we are going to be doing with our door knocking campaign of Affordable Seattle. We're going to offer, we're going to share with working people the way that they can join us and fight for housing affordability. That is how we won 15. That is how we are now on the cusp of winning a tax on Seattle's rich. It is because socialists and many other activists, rank and file Democrats, Bernie-crats, people who voted for Hillary Clinton, people who didn't vote at all, so many people agree on this. It is because of people like Courtney and Anitra that we are here, who despite facing incredible challenges in their own lives are out here because they know that engaging in collective organized activism is the only way to solve their own problems. And that is why they are here in solidarity with everyone else. They are not just fighting for themselves. That is why the corporate politicians in City Hall absolutely hate the idea of tax the rich, but they are going to be forced to vote for it. Yeah. Just like they were forced to vote for $15 an hour. And a little nugget, if you haven't seen this already on social media, Steve Ballmer, multi-billionaire Steve Ballmer said, if you tax the rich, it'll create a bad business climate. What we said was, you're completely wrong. We challenge you to a debate on this. But the reason I'm mentioning this is that the people who are in the 1% will never agree with us. So when you go and knock on the doors and people, well-meaning people ask you, can't we do this nicely? Why do we have to do an us versus them? We should explain to them in a friendly way that no, you can't. Capitalism is inherently us versus them. And we have to pick a side. So if people have a desire in them to want social justice outcomes, the only way it happens if we realize that we have to fight for ourselves. And that is why this independent mass movement also needs its own advocates, not just in City Hall, but in every level of government. And that is why when we're going to be talking about Affordable Seattle campaign, we're also going to be talking about Nikita Oliver and John Grant, both, as Emily said, who have rejected corporate money, big developer money. They're supporting rent control, 25% affordability, making landlords pay for economic evictions. So let's make sure that every person we talk to today and going forward this year feels greatly empowered, that they are not alone, that we are together, but not just that we are together. We have an organized campaign. We have a strategy, not just to fight because it makes us feel good, but to freaking win. Yeah.
Okay, so I have one more chant for us, but as some